Greetings, I'm John the Verbose, and this is my video for the YouTube Pagan Challenge on month 1 of 2017. I'm going to do these moonly or monthly because the challenge list is kind of grouped into, well, most of it can be fit into monthly videos of 4 topics apiece. So whether or not that was the intention of having that much flexibility, I'm not certain, but it is apparent, so I'm going to do that. So this month's video covers topics about Book of Shadows, Grimoires, journals, etc. As I am a druid, particularly a reformed druid, I don't really use Books of Shadows. Books of Shadows, a lot of people ask what the difference is, and I think that is partially open to interpretation, but the common definitions seem to revolve around Books of Shadows being something very personal to you, your own thoughts, your inner psyche. Stuff that you generally don't share. Whereas you have a grimoire, that's more of like a traditional spell book, how-to, I think heavily on the how-to bit. And so Book of Shadows and journals to me seemed a bit more interchangeable. And so I do have journals, and I have been journaling in my own practice before I was a druid, since I was a kid, just journaling about stuff. And then once I became a druid, it's like I started writing stuff down, and it's very interesting to go back over that old stuff and see how much you've learned in the time since, and look over and notice things that you may have wanted to come back to and may have forgotten about. So those can be very powerful tools. Also, there are some mundane journals that I still do, also for my practice personally and for my grove, especially when my grove lets me record video or take pictures of them. I tend to share those experiences on my Tumblr blog, and that is available at minnesotadruids.tumblr.com with no symbols in between. But when it comes to grimoires, that is something that I do practice, and I like to do bookbinding. It's one of my hobbies, and so this is my first grimoire that I ever made. It's of Icelandic magical staves, and I've showed this before in a previous video, so if you just go to my page under the videos tab and search for grimoires, that you'll find a few videos that showcase various things, but this was all handmade entirely. None of this was printed on. When I actually made this, I did all the pre-planning first on a separate notebook, and then I decided what was going to go in what order by taking all that notebook paper and reassembling everything into the proper order that I wanted it to be. And so then I wrote it down onto the actual paper that's going to be in the books, and when I did that, there are, I believe this one has 6 sheets of paper that are folded in half and over each other. So the front of one page is going to be like the back side of something several pages farther down. I think I worded that funny, but it's a very complicated concept to sort out. So pre-planning when doing your own handmade books, when you want to have everything written first and then bind the book, which to me that's the proper way of doing that, but there's no wrong way. That's just my preference. I also made a smaller one for Glagolitic Rune interpretations. This one is also handwritten with dip pens and calligraphy ink, and so much shorter. Just another how-to for Glagolitic Rune interpretations. I've also showcased this book. It is my personal excerpts from a Reformed Druid anthology, and I actually have a video. It's like a 20-minute video of how I actually made this, and some of the most common questions I get about it, like this one was actually all printed out in the computer first, and then I bound it together. And so people were asking, how do I do the page numbering? Because I think this one has 4 sheets of paper folded in half, grouped into 13 sections. And so that was very complicated in itself. In the word processor that I used, I had to do everything manually and arrange all the pages by their text blocks in a very convoluted way that Microsoft Office and LibreOffice and OpenOffice, anything I used, they did not have the functionality to sort that out automatically for me. So I had to do a lot of manual edits. It was the most time-consuming thing ever. Now, when I'm physically making the book, it can sometimes feel like a very mundane process of craftiness, but at the same time, it can be very spiritual. There's the challenge, the element of challenge of every step in the process. And it's the whole time you're kind of visualizing how you want the end result to look. And so there is something magical about making a book by hand, because you're constantly thinking of like, am I doing this right? What's the next step? What if I screw up? How can I recover? How much time do I have? Because we have various types of glue involved, and they set at various rates, whether they're exposed to air or sealed and pressed overnight. And will things shift when they're pressed? So lots of things to think about, and it keeps the mind very busy. But when it comes to things that are purely spiritual and not physically necessary to the completion of the book, it's like, do I do anything to consecrate these? Yes, I do. There are, like on this one, underneath the leather cover, on the oak boards, there are inscriptions. And I feel bad because I don't remember exactly what it says, but it is a general protection inscription. Also, I did consecrate this with the 4 elements. Normally, I don't really work with the 4 elements, but the process of doing so by consecrating it with elements or aspects of earth, wind, fire, and water, it sets it aside as something special. Like, this is not just a mundane book. So it does have that psychological element too. Also, once it was done, I made a sachet of herbs. Actually, I believe it was just sage and anise seed. And so sage is very cleansing, and so it kind of, like, metaphysically, it's known to reset things that it is cleansing. And so with the anise is, metaphysically speaking, it has a lot of unique properties, and so it is a general protective ward among some of its aspects, and it is good for blessing or consecrating. It also aids in divination and magical workings. And so with this one being my book on Icelandic magical staves, it seemed very fitting to do so. It also smells really good, and the glue that I used in this book smelled really, really bad. And so for the first few weeks of having it, I would keep this in a drawer in a sachet of the star anise and sage, and I would advance it a few pages every day until it made its way to the back of the book. And so I no longer smell the glue. And I made this in 2010 or 11. I think it was 2011 I made this, and I can still smell the star anise, and I haven't had that sachet in there for a few years. So that is splendid. So that's all I had for this month. Thank you for watching my video, and we will see you next month.